Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Explainer. Today we are tackling a seriously massive, absolutely vital topic, but don't worry, we're going to break the whole shebang down so it actually makes logical sense. We're essentially going to map out our future by demystifying two terms that you literally hear everywhere: sustainability and sustainable development. We throw these words around a lot, right? You hear them in the news, in business pitches, in politics, but what do they actually mean when you strip away all the corporate buzzwords? Well, today we're going to explore the true dimensions of a sustainable future and build a really solid mental framework so you understand exactly how we're supposed to get there. Before we put this thing in drive, here's a super quick look at our roadmap for today. We'll start with the three pillars, then look at destination versus journey. Third is visualizing the balance. Fourth, we'll be debating the right path. Fifth is approaches to transition, and we'll wrap it all up with key takeaways. All right, let's jump right into section one, the three pillars. Let's establish the foundational rules of the road. I actually want to kick things off with a question for you. When you hear the word sustainability, what immediately pops into your head? Is it just about, planting a bunch of trees? Is it purely about saving the environment? No, that's a very, very common assumption. But as we're going to see, true sustainability is, well, actually, scratch that. It's more like a three-legged stool. It rests on three deeply interconnected foundations, and you absolutely cannot sacrifice one for another without the whole thing tipping over. So our first pillar is environmental sustainability. Now, this is the one we usually think of first, for sure. It's rooted in planet-first thinking. It means preserving biodiversity and aggressively protecting our ecosystems from just completely degrading. Think strict resource efficiency here. So using only renewable resources within their natural regeneration rates and actively slashing waste. It also means fighting for climate stability. We literally have to limit greenhouse gas emissions and control pollution so we don't contaminate our air, our water, and our soil. Honestly, this is the absolute bedrock of preserving the natural world for future generations. But here's the thing, an economy simply isn't sustainable if it constantly depletes its own resources just to function, right? So our second pillar is economic sustainability. This pillar champions long-run prosperity through what we call a circular economy, which basically means designing out waste entirely and keeping products in use for as long as humanly possible. It relies super heavily on green investment to actually fund those low-carbon, resource-efficient technologies. But maybe more importantly, it accounts for natural capital. This means we are actually assigning a real, tangible value to nature in our economic decision-making, ensuring that our growth is inclusive and actually reduces poverty rather than just widening the inequality gap. Which leads us perfectly into the third pillar, social sustainability. This balances the entire structure by putting people at the center. Because let's face it, you cannot have a sustainable future without equity and justice. That means fair access to resources and opportunities for everyone, not just a select few. This pillar demands a real focus on health, well-being, and safe environments. It requires us to invest in education and preserve our cultural heritage. Ultimately, it's about building community resilience so that our societies can actually withstand future shocks and adapt to change. So environmental, economic, and social, all three of those pillars must be in absolute balance. Okay, with our pillars firmly established, let's move on to section 2, destination versus journey. Let's see how the end goal differs from the actual process of getting there. Now, we often use the terms sustainability and sustainable development interchangeably, but they are related yet very distinct concepts, and understanding this difference really, really matters. Sustainability is a state. It's a condition to be achieved and maintained. It's the capacity of our systems to endure. It is the end goal. We measure it by looking at things like ecological footprints and planetary boundaries. Sustainable development, on the other hand, well, that's the process. It was famously defined way back in 1987 by the Brundtland Commission as the process of meeting present needs without compromising future generations. It's the pathway of change, and we measure that by looking at the Sustainable Development Goals or the Human Development Index. To put it into perspective, think of sustainability as our moral compass. It sets the direction. It defines the ultimate end goal, a world that operates safely within ecological limits while still meeting all human needs. Without this overarching goal, our human development basically has no direction at all. It's exactly what we are trying to preserve and protect for the long haul. Conversely, sustainable development is the road itself. It charts the practical route. If sustainability is that beautiful destination in the future, sustainable development is the vehicle we're driving today. It represents the actual real-world policies, the clean energy transitions, the technologies, and the governance mechanisms that are physically driving our societies forward toward that destination. Right, moving to section 3, visualizing the balance. Now that we have our map and our destination, how do the experts actually plot out the relationship between the environment, the economy, and society? Experts use a few different visual frameworks here, and each one tells a slightly different story about how these things connect. First up, we have the silo model. This simply shows three equal independent pillars side by side. It's a super easy starting point, but it doesn't really show how they integrate. Stepping up from that is the Venn diagram, which I'm sure you've likely seen before. By showing overlapping circles, it highlights the trade-offs and synergies, placing sustainable development right in that sweet spot in the very middle. Moving to a much more comprehensive view, we have the nested or Russian doll model. This one is totally fascinating because it shows the economy embedded entirely within society and society embedded entirely within the environment. It illustrates a strict hierarchy of dependence because, hey, without an environment, you have no society, and without a society, you have no economy. And finally, the prism model. This takes those dimensions and places them at the corners of a triangle to really emphasize the tension and the specific trade-offs between each pair. Section 4, Debating the Right Path. Just like any road trip, the passengers are going to debate the best route to take. Let's neutrally examine the different philosophical directions we could take to reach our destination. So, the absolute crucial point of debate here starts with how we view capital. There are two major contrasting views. Weak sustainability argues that natural and human-made capital are substitutable. It essentially believes that human technology can eventually replace depleted natural resources. That means economic growth remains fully compatible with nature, just as long as the total capital stock is maintained. On the flip side, strong sustainability argues no way. Natural capital is entirely unique and completely irreplaceable. It argues that some ecosystem services simply cannot be substituted by any piece of technology, meaning minimum levels of natural capital, like our biodiversity, must be strictly preserved. Because once they are gone, you literally cannot buy them back. Building on that exact debate, experts rely on a few major schools of thought to navigate this challenge. On one side, we have frameworks like ecological modernization and neoclassical approaches. These suggest that capitalism and technology can actually be reformed from within. They rely on market mechanisms, green investment, and carbon taxes to decouple economic growth from environmental harm. Now, on a completely different path, we have political ecology and eco-socialism, as well as degrowth. These frameworks push back pretty hard, arguing that infinite growth on a finite planet is simply impossible. They suggest societies must deliberately shrink material throughput and redefine well-being completely outside of GDP. Then there's deep ecology. This posits that nature has intrinsic value, totally independent of human use, requiring a massive, radical shift in how humans impact the world. And finally, the capability approach. This one focuses on expanding human freedoms like health and education while staying strictly within ecological limits. Remember, these are all just different, completely valid lenses that experts and policymakers use to try and solve the exact same puzzle. All right, let's jump to Section 5, Approaches to Transition. We're shifting gears from the philosophy of our roadmap to the actual execution. Let's look at how we practically drive forward. When transitioning towards sustainable systems, we essentially have three levers of change we can pull. The first is efficiency, doing more with less. This is optimizing our existing processes so we use fewer resources for the exact same output. The second lever is consistency, aligning our systems with nature's cycles. This means closing the loops, eliminating toxic substances, and making sure our material flows are actually compatible with the natural world. But the ultimate, and definitely the most challenging lever, is sufficiency. This is having the wisdom to just say, enough is enough. It means questioning the very scale and purpose of our production and consumption and focusing on our actual societal needs rather than just our endless wants. Now, because sufficiency requires such a massive societal shift, experts break it down into three actionable variants. First is reduction, deliberately decreasing the absolute volume of what we produce and consume so we can actually stay within planetary boundaries. Second is adaptation, actually modifying our lifestyles, our infrastructure, and our social practices. It's all about redesigning how we meet our needs in the first place. And third is substitution, swapping out unsustainable goods and practices for sustainable alternatives. This allows us to maintain our well-being, but we achieve it through much, much lower impact options. Okay, Section 6, Key Takeaways. As we pull into our final checkpoint, let's review the critical lessons from today's explainer. If you remember absolutely nothing else today, please take these 4 points with you. First, our 3 pillars, environmental, economic, and social, are deeply interconnected and completely inseparable. True sustainability means managing the incredibly delicate trade-offs between them all. Second, remember our map. Sustainability is the destination, the end goal, while sustainable development is the practical journey and the process of getting there. Third, there is no single perfect paradigm here. Multiple valid frameworks and schools of thought offer complementary lenses, and we really need all of them to capture the full complexity of this issue. And finally, shared responsibility. This journey requires active participation from governments, businesses, communities, and every single one of us. And that brings us to our final thought for the day. Explorer Robert Swan famously said, "The greatest threat to our planet is the belief that someone else will save it." It's a really powerful reminder that while we can map out the destination and study the vehicle all day long, the journey ultimately requires us all to actually take the wheel. So I'll leave you with this. What is one way you can pull the levers of efficiency, consistency, or sufficiency in your own life today? Thanks so much for exploring this massive topic with me in today's Explainer. Keep learning, stay curious, and I'll catch you next time.